is unavailable. But does that mean it's detected the stream yet? It says I'm live. Okay, well, we'll go with that then. Hello. It's a little better. It's a little different. 4x3 instead of widescreen. I am dirty and red and splotchy, all that fun stuff it looks like, because I just got done cutting the grass. I have less than an hour to... Oh, man. Oh, no, it's just gunk. Okay. Sorry about that. I have less than an hour here to talk to you guys about nothing in particular, I don't think. I had a problem the last couple of weeks getting this to work. I'm not sure it's going to work. I updated the software for my camera, which is a Logitech C920. And the camera controls to a new driver level, new software level, a new driver. Supposed to give me more features, and instead it doesn't work as well with OBS. So I'm kind of like, what do you do? I can either roll back to the old software, which hadn't been updated in a year or two, or go with this capture software. For some reason, the camera settings... let's go here. Where's my both? This one, okay. You see my settings now. Oops, that's not going to work. Here we go. This one. This window here. You see it defaults to standard, not widescreen. Selecting widescreen does not give me the ability to change in OBS at all. And if I close this and reopen it, it goes back to standard. I haven't found a way to make that widescreen at all. Under advanced here, I always have to turn off auto white balance and autofocus. Otherwise, the camera tends to zoom in and out a bit as we're sitting here trying to look at it, which is rather annoying. Most of the other settings I play with on some good days. Right now, I look extremely washed out. Back to main cam. Let's turn white balance down. Yeah, like that. That does make me look more washed out. It's around 31. Color intensity. There. How's that? I mean, I'm a little splotchy, but not that splotchy. Jeez. This light here is a little... Man, maybe I am that splotchy. I just want to... I know you guys logged in here just to hear me talk, say, a lot. There. That's better. That looks more like me. Right there. Yeah. Let's go redo all that. Focus. White balance. Whatever. That's not why I'm here today. I'm not here necessarily to talk about this stuff. Although, I've tried the last couple of weeks to... Oh, there's an update. Okay. Well, this may drop my camera. And it may not. I don't know. Camera not available. You know, I might try to use their software next time instead of OBS. But OBS gives me the nice little frames and things like that. I mean, I can do some of that with their software. I can do like the webcam and then the capture, screen capture and the same thing. But I don't know if this means I've dropped or not. I had this problem before. So like I said, maybe this will work, maybe this won't work. I don't have anything really Last week I tried to do a stream. Was it last week or the week before that? Going through all my subscriptions. It was a 2-hour stream. Maybe it was a 3-hour stream. Going through all the channels that I subscribed to and talking about why I was unsubscribing from what ended up being about a quarter of the channels I subscribed to. I had about 470, and I dropped down to about 365. I talked about why I got rid of some. Some people just haven't been active in over a year or more. Even if I like their content, if they're not making anything new, it just makes my list longer. You know, it may or may not bite me in the ass at some point, but probably not. Some other ones, content creators that I decided I'm just not dealing with anymore. I haven't watched their content in a while. When I do watch their content, it doesn't make me happy. It doesn't give me. It's not provocative or thought-provoking in any way. A lot of times it's just irritating and ideological, and I gave up on it. I did finally unsubscribe from Steve Shives and Christy Winters. I've been hanging on to them because up until maybe 8 months ago, I still enjoyed Steven Stuffy on Steve's channel, in spite of all of his other ideological positions, which were kind of bad. His Star Trek stuff was well considered critical thinking, critical theory kind of like interpretations of the show, but that started drifting too far away from what I would say is like rational discourse on it. And got too ideologically centered on feminism or what does Jordan Peterson call it? Postmodern Marxist, whatever. I don't remember. Whatever his catchphrase is for that stuff. Christy Winters, I have not watched any of her content in almost 2 years. The last thing I watched of hers was that's just a cable. Was a take on the historicity of Jesus, which I meant to respond to. I still may respond to it. I have it flagged for watch later, I believe. And it was like a 4-part series that I don't think she ever finished, but basically it was a compilation of Bart Ehrman Says, and I think that I don't like the idea of being called a mythicist necessarily, but that's a position that I would fall on. I don't believe Jesus was the man called Jesus in biblical narrative was an actual person. I have no reason to believe he was an actual person. There's nothing that is indicated in the historical record that this was anything but a story character, basically. Much like, a character in Aesop's Fables. This camera seems like it's awfully low. Don't mind me. Don't mind the man behind the curtain. Isn't that the line? That's a little better. Huh? Got my Capsule Corp t-shirt, brand new, on. Got it on Amazon because I can't find Dragon Ball stuff anywhere. And even sometimes on Amazon I can't find stuff, but happen to find this one. Still pretty hot and sweaty from cutting the grass. It's not that hot today. It's only about 80. 79. And sunny. But it's humid. And rain's coming. And my lawnmower sucks. And I got about 1/3 of an acre that I cut with a push mower. And it's self-propelled, but the self-propelled doesn't work anymore. It does turn one wheel, but it turns one wheel at much a slower pace than I walk. Now, the other wheel, the other front wheel that used to pull it, is like the third or fourth wheel I've had since I've had this lawnmower, because it keeps stripping the the way the wheel works is there's a center sprocket, and then there's another sprocket that's actually turned by the engine for the self-propelled, and then it turns the wheel. What happens is all of these plastic sprockets on the inside of the wheel get broken off, and then it doesn't turn anymore. Well, not only does it not turn anymore, but now it actively works like a brake. And it's kind of like if you trying to push a car in a manual transmission, trying to push a car when it's in gear. It'll go not well, especially if it's in first or something like that. So that's kind of what it's like, and it's kind of annoying. And yeah, basically. So why have I brought you here today? I had a bunch of stuff that I had talked about in the past, and I'm a bunch of bounce around here. I have anything with chat today. I don't really have, I had more of a topic coming into this than I do now. There are always things I want to talk about, and nothing that I'm actually passionate about right now. So, use a keyframe for 4 seconds or less. Connection not being sent often enough cause buffering. I did not set any of that stuff. This is a disaster of a stream. Hopefully it's still working. Hopefully the playback will work fine. I wonder if I went to my channel. Oh, hey, look. I'm live. I did not set any of that stuff. Funny is that? That's me. Hi. This is a disaster of a stream. Hopefully it's still working. Hopefully the playback will work fine. This is a good way to check my audio levels, which I could probably do. I pull this in a little bit. I don't look that terrible on here, I guess. It's catching up. It's a little behind. Oh, hey, look. I'm live. Now, I wonder if I leave this here, for how long we'll get this, meta on meta Inception kind of thing. That's me. Hi. All right, let's get off this page. Boop. So it's working, at least to that extent, which is good, because like I said, I did the 3-hour stream that didn't work, and I did another stream after that just as a test, which didn't work. I didn't say that part, but I did actually do that. And I had more things to address at that time. Right now, I don't think I have a whole lot to talk about. I was going to talk about, up until today, Steven Crowder and what's his name? I don't remember. The guy that wrote the piece on him that got Crowder's channel demonetized. And my question that I would have, I should probably be careful with this. Let's go to here. Boop. So, my whole take on the thing is, nobody should be surprised that Crowder was demonetized. I don't think that YouTube will do any other steps other than that. And I've said this, I don't know how many times before. Whenever, any time any of this stuff comes up, I need everyone to remember, especially people like Tim Pool, who I kind of like Tim Pool, but I kind of don't like Tim Pool, because Tim Pool has a tendency to talk about, go for, lean into, broadly speaking, more conspiratorial angles on things. he doesn't seem like he believes the conspiracies necessarily, but he does seem to want to give them some credibility, at least in his titles and thumbnails. And I kind of see that, like it's the same kind of thing, the thing that I see with Joe Rogan sometimes. They're easy to convince out of it, but that tends to be where they lean towards, and I think that's probably where Joe Rogan gets some of his heat from being right wing, which he isn't. Joe's fairly left. He's center left, but he's more left than right. He's certainly more liberal than conservative. Not that those are dichotomies. Those are just he tends to be more liberal. Period. And that's something. You know what? I'm going to rant about that for a minute while I'm at it. Oh. Most recently renewed my interest in this from Philip DeFranco. That's something to read later. That's something else. Blah, blah. I think that's all I got. I don't have anything over here, this stuff. Anyway, Philip DeFranco did a video the other day talking about I believe it was a Steven Crowder thing, and it came down to, there was a comment that he made about whether you're liberal or conservative, and I want to bash my head in because I did not. If I'm going to go back in time to 1992 or 1987, I want to be younger too, along with it, because this liberal conservative dichotomy thing is it's bullshit. There are not liberals on one side and conservatives on the other side. There are progressives on one side and conservatives on the other side. Liberal has to do with liberty, and you can be a conservative liberal. You can be a conservative who believes in freedom of speech and freedom of the press and all this kind of stuff, believing that those are conserving those values. Being conservative means you want things to stay the same or go back to some way that they were. You're trying to conserve a particular point of view. Liberals, on the other side, want to allow people to do things. The idea of liberal shares the root with the word liberty, just like libertarian, the same root there. Libertarians tend to be more conservative liberals. They tend to favor laissez-faire economics. They tend to favor personal freedom and choice and things like that. They want the government out of their business because they want to have the freedom to do what they want. That's a liberal person, but they have the conservative values of small government, things that we used to have smaller government. We used to have all these things. They want to bring those things back. They want to conserve those ideas. Progressives are the opposite of conservative. They want to progress instead of conserve. Progressive ideals are the ones that move us forward. I'm a liberal progressive. I want to move things forward. I'm an incrementalist, though, and I think that, and if I hit this mic stand one more time, I want us to move forward at a reasonable pace. But I want to move forward. I want to take our time and make changes, which we can do. I did not ask for Cortana to pop up there, but she did. I want us to move forward sensibly. We can make so many changes in a single generation that it's silly for us to be fighting over this stuff. But everybody wants to be first. Nobody wants to be the person that has to wait 20 years for some change. And so we end up with these rushes of progress where we end up with these identity politics and all of these progressive ideas all stacking up at one point. There have been some fortunate barriers. By fortunate, I mean fortunate in quotes here. Fortunate from the conservative perspective to progress in the past, and typically that is the slow progress of media and of government and of communicating ideas between people. It could take, a decade or so for an idea started in a college to make it to other colleges, let alone to to the mainstream press. And so you have an idea like second wave feminism, perfect example. Second wave feminism, the choice feminism, the equality feminism, and I'm ascribing these things to second wave feminism whether they belong there or not, because I'm going to illustrate a point here with it. They had to be taught in schools by professors who then educated people who went out into the world, and then eventually some of them got jobs as professors at other schools and taught those same principles along the way. Which is why you look at this stuff happening in the 60s, not really ramping up to the public consciousness till like around the 80s or so. When people are kind of like, yeah, that makes more sense. We should let people make their own choices. When that idea became more mainstream. That's how things used to work. And so you didn't have this stacking of things now. With modern technology, we've fallen into one of the traps of communication, which is that we're having information overload. We aren't mentally or socially able to process all this stuff appropriately all the time. So we end up with this stacking up of ideas, and then we try to prioritize them, and we don't have good grounding on the prioritizing them, and we basically screw ourselves, and we end up with lots of infighting and stuff like this. A lot of this stuff is, in the past was ideas were shared quickly through pamphlet or newspaper or things like that. You look at the social revolutions, like the communist, revolution in Russia was primarily funded by propaganda pamphlets handed out in public whenever they weren't being suppressed by the government. It wasn't immediate. I right now can go on Twitter, and I have 44 people follow me. I can tweet out to them, or just tweet out in general, and maybe they'll see it, to 44 people sitting at my desk in my basement. I don't have to go hand out flyers. You know how long it would take me to hand out 45 flyers on the street? 20 minutes, half an hour, not to mention the time driving there, printing everything up, getting them. I mean, there's a lot more stacking that goes on, and the cost of my time, energy, and effort has been greatly reduced through technology. And I would argue that the conveyance of information is really what makes society stable and allows them to prosper. I don't think roads and their ability to move troops from one place to another, the whole Roman road system, made Rome strong because it allowed them to move troops. I believe it made them strong because it allowed them to share information. The societies that got big and the empires that got big were ones that had free flow of people between regions, not just troops. The idea that it was the fact that the Romans could march a legion 50 kilometers a day along the roads, somehow gave them some stability. I just don't think works, because usually they would just typically they had standing armies in places and loyal subjects. They didn't require massive tributes to be paid back to Rome. They basically had a tax of some kind, and people who served in the military could be treated as if they were citizens in that region, and people became monetarily and emotionally and socially invested in being a Roman. And the road certainly didn't help them when they were sacked by the Visigoths or the Huns. Or more importantly, you know, the collapse of the broader Roman structure probably came about with the spread of Christianity. So it worked in its favor and to its detriment. And that's some of what's happening right now with the information superhighway. Is, you know, we're able to communicate this stuff quickly to massive audiences, and people don't know how to process it properly. They don't have the time to sit down and think about it because they're being hit by so much more stuff. It's not just me getting information out there. It's me and the anti-vaxxers and the anti-abortionists and the creationists and the flat earthers. They're all getting their message out there at the same time, and people they are falling into the trap of not being able to process properly. They need to have a solid epistemic foundation in the things and the principles that they believe are important, and they should, if they have that, then they can make the information processing a lot easier. I have a lot of feelers out there in the world of information gathering, and even I'm a little overwhelmed by it. But I know how to process the stuff. I know what I look for. I know when to back away and when to, you know, really make other positions. I guess I don't know. I guess I don't know where I was going with that one. To make my positions more concretely based and to be flexible with them, so that I'm not just saying I believe this, therefore this is true. Because I can always find more information that would make me right or make me wrong. So, having said that, I want to talk briefly about this whole pumpkin thing. In the atheist, the modern atheist community, there is this movement. I'll say, I don't want to pick on Shannon. I'm not picking on Shannon. It was originally because the NIFB, New Fundamentalist. Yeah, here's the thing. You can go watch this video here by Shannon Q about hate preach the next generation. It kind of explains the whole thing. Dear Mr. Atheist did a video responding to some ill-considered positions held by this group. I don't like hyperbole to the point where I try to avoid it, even when I think it applies. I don't fully agree on the positions that they've taken, that this group has taken here. So the long and short of it, there's a group of fundamentalist Baptist churches that basically believe that gays should be put to death by the state. They share that view. They conflate LGBTQ people with the idea that they're pedophilia and things. You know, the typical, what you'd expect from Christians, kind of from conservative Christians' point of view, from maybe like the 80s, you know. And one of the pastors, I don't remember which one. If you watch the video, it's all in there. This hate preach next generation. Go to Shannon Q's channel, YouTube channel, or go to her Twitter. You'll find a link to the video. If I remember, I'll put it in the description. I probably won't remember though, so just go here and watch it. um, Basically, calling Mr. Atheist a pumpkin because the pumpkin is the world's biggest fruit, and he embraced that and decided that him and people who agree with him were going to form the Pumpkin Posse, which is a group of internet atheists, which I laugh at because it makes me think of Adam Friended, but a group of atheists, YouTubers and Twitterers and whatnot were going to flag PayPal in particular because that's one of the places where they receive donations. That these churches who advocate for the murder and death of GRSM individuals, and I can't remember what the acronym stands for. Gay something. Anyway, basically flagging them down on PayPal because their positions are hate speech, and PayPal's policies don't allow for them to host people who espouse that type of views. Like, they don't want to do business with them. Okay, cool. I'm a little gray in this particular campaign. I understand their position. I also understand that if the tables were reversed, that I don't think that it would be right for this to happen to somebody else. If LGBTQ plus or LGBTQIA plus insert, acronym here. I think that if this was the 1980s or the 1970s, these churches would be advocating for PayPal to not take donations for these groups. And because that was considered the mainstream, or they might have had a policy preventing them from doing it, I think that that's kind of, they would have used that stick the other way. And that's kind of how I judge how comfortable I am with these things. These people are bad. I think that their positions are awful. I'm more for arguing against their positions and letting other people come to the conclusions of what they think about them. I don't think the people who hold these positions are necessarily, I wouldn't say that they're bad people. I would say that this is a bad position, and that arguing against that position is what's important, not the people. But at the same time, I get that this is, I don't know, it's a slippery slope thing for me. I mean, if the roles were reversed, I wouldn't want it, the other way. I don't think that PayPal or YouTube or, well, necessarily PayPal in particular, I don't think PayPal should be necessarily getting involved in the politics of the people who use their service. So that's my position on it. Just like I don't think that YouTube should be censoring content creators for whatever they think, because I think that, and I don't have a problem with companies deciding not to monetize videos, and I think that YouTube kind of has themselves in a kind of a bad position with that, because advertisers don't want to have to do the hard work of assessing content on YouTube. So YouTube basically has to say, here's the things we allow, here's the things we don't allow. If we allow it, then you're in this tier of, or this group, which has its own tiers, this group of advertising friendliness. Then there's a middle group. It's kind of like that's the yellow dollar sign, and then there's the gray stuff. There's always the risk of changing fields and moving your way back up to green is probably not entirely but close to impossible. If your channel is tiered in that way. Most of my content would probably fall under the yellow monetization. I don't swear a lot. I do swear some. I do talk about things that are not necessarily fun and nobody's really going to care about. You would not find my show on NBC at 8:30 p.m. on a Wednesday or Sunday. But you might find it after 10, and you probably find it on cable somewhere. So broadcast television is still where the money's at. TV channels aren't going out of business. TV channels still make good money off ad revenue. The reason that Disney is starting their own streaming service, which they may not need to because apparently they're going to be the sole owners of Hulu now. The content is where the money's at, and bringing in those eyeballs. And while I'm thinking of this, interactive television is never really going to be a thing. Interactive TV is games. They're separate genres. People don't want to sit down and... It's a neat fluke. Something like, what was it? The Black Mirror... I want to say Bandersnatch, but I don't know if that was it or not. With the different possible endings and whatever. I don't see that becoming a critical media source, because that's a game. And that's where that'll end up going. My point, though, overall, is that if you want to make money on YouTube and you want to be successful, you need to make content that ABC would put on. You need to make content that would be okay substantively as ABC or Fox going on primetime television. You can skate with some daytime stuff. But broadly speaking, you're seriously talking about if you want to be a green dollar sign video on a green dollar sign channel, you need to be out of time. You basically need to make family friendly content and funny and engaging stuff that's low cost. The reason that Steven Crowder's channel got demonetized essentially was because he's not making that type of content. He's making content that people want to see, but that's not safe for advertisers. Nobody wants to be an advertiser affiliated with a channel that could be controversial. So they won't, basically. There are some that are more willing to take a risk, but they're typically ones that they're not paying the big money for the content. They're not Dawn dish soap. They're not Tide. They're not Wendy's or Burger King. They're Rogue Fitness and they're Purple Mattress. People who have smaller markets in general, but who are looking to... They're more concerned with getting their eyeballs on their product now than they are about the overall longevity of their advertising program. So, I'm torn on this whole pumpkin thing. I'm not torn by the pumpkin thing. I would be a pumpkin thing if I was that person that backed campaigns like this. I'm not necessarily on board with all the things that they're doing here. I'm not about to make a video on it and call people out and be like, hey, this is terrible, stop doing this. I will say though that I'm not going to be engaging in any of this stuff. That's how we'll put it. So, another thing I had wanted to, we're going to talk about a couple things from Twitter here today. Starting with our buddy Adam. Hi, Adam. And Adam has made a couple of tweets like this in the last day or two. I don't know if you can see this or not. So, iCenter65 says they're talking about secularism and what would constitute, like, you know, a secular system that could replace religion. My first thing was that, you know, what is an evolved function of religion, specifically, and in specific response, this iCenter65 said things like, you know, cosmology, medicine, value of human worth, you know, what those can all be secularly sourced. Vesuvius maybe necessarily disagreed. Tend to focus a little bit on feminism angle. I don't know why. Like, he brought this up and then asked iCenter to defend that, which I didn't understand either. To Vesuvius, I don't want to keep putting an R in there. To Vesuvius, you're never going to watch this. If you do happen to see it, though, my question here is human value exclusive to religions? Or are there other systems out there that can ascribe value to human beings? And even if there are not, which I know there are, if there are not, two questions would be, one, so, and two, if you assume that religions are making some kind of basis for human value, if those religions aren't true, if they're based on beliefs that are false or incorrect, does that change the value of people? If, let's say, we're using Christianity to ascribe a value to people, and people are valuable because it says that God said people are valuable, and it turns out God isn't real, does that devalue people, or does it just make the belief incorrect? The basis of the belief incorrect? I don't think you can make an argument that somehow taking away religions themselves would devalue people. I would also make the argument that, related to but not directly in response to, that we don't use religions to ascribe value to people. We find value in people, and then we attribute that to certain religious things. The fact that we think people are valuable is only reaffirmed by religious faith. It is not given to us by religious faith. And this is a contention I've had with Adam and some other of his people's understandings of religion that he follows, or in general, that morality is not a system for a group. People have individual morals. Morals are a system to ascribe individual behaviors. They are not group behaviors. Ethics are a behavior of individuals within a group. They are the social things that people do between one another. Those are ethical things. Morals are about personal behavior. Sitting in your basement or sitting in your bedroom or the bathroom, in the shower in the morning, it could be considered immoral to masturbate in the shower, for example. But it can't be considered unethical to masturbate in the shower unless there are conditions that make it a social norm or not, make it socially useful to not masturbate, for example. Like you're part of a breeding program to, save the people from the Ottawa Islands in the South Pacific because there have certain specific genetic components that make them immune to AIDS or something like that. And you need to go have a bunch of babies so you can get enough, the gene code to make an AIDS vaccine. It only becomes unethical when it has to do with your social interaction within the group. It wouldn't be unethical to do that. It might be immoral to do that because morals are about personal behaviors. We tend to follow moral groups that agree with us. And though we allow those groups for low value things to affect how we feel about things. And there can be an accumulative effect where we can be a normal person who gets some strange ideas but are of low value, and those compound into explaining much larger things eventually that make us change our positions on things. But broadly speaking, people leave churches all the time or split off from churches all the time because churches in particular is an example I'm going to use here, because their morals differ. They're already part of a group. Individuals in a group that share moral systems, but then decide, you know what, I don't like the direction this church is going. Let's go change our group, our social group, to a group that better shares our, broadly speaking, our more primary ideological positions. If you're part of let's say you're part of an Episcopal church that is pro-choice, and you come to the conclusion that, no, abortion is murder or whatever, you will leave that church. Go find a church that is pro-life, and unless they find a position within that church that says, abortion is murder and women should be subservient to their husbands, and you don't agree with that, you'll stay at that church until you come into that next major conflict. Then you'll go from there and try to find a pro-life church that also thinks that women should not be subservient, and then because those are your positions, you will stay there. Now, if it takes you a while to get to the whole, women should be subservient to their husbands thing in your church, you may, over time, through exposure, find arguments that change your position. And yes, you'll be changed by arguments emotionally or logically or whatever. But we join the moral systems that match what we think, not the other way around. They do influence us. They do have some say. But a lot of it is based on the shape of the basket that we have when we're born. The types of stuff that we can hold that will have an impact on us. I know I've probably said this before. If I haven't, I'll go through it really quick again. Genetics, I believe, give us different types of containers. I use baskets as an example. When we're born, and we put stuff in those baskets that we carry through life experientially or logically or whatever. We all have different shapes and sizes of baskets. We have some baskets, we have a tendency to get similar baskets to our parents, which is why liberals tend to have liberal kids, things like that. We can be, and why people can be exposed to absolutely terrible things or absolutely wonderful things and turn out to be the exact opposite of those things, because they'll pick up more on certain aspects because their basket can hold those things easier than it can other things. Some experiences may be like sand, some experiences may be like, I keep hitting my mic stand, they may be like rocks, they may be like mud, and some different vessels will hold those things differently. Marbles versus strawberries versus, butt plugs, whatever. The baskets are designed to sift through things that don't stay in the basket as well and retain the things that will stay in the basket better. And all of our experiences are kind of this muck of things that get thrown at us, and there are things we retain from those experiences more than others. And it's all based on genetically what we're born with, and what the things in our basket can hold can also make it easier or more difficult to hold other things in the future. So if we have a basket that's really good at holding gravel, as an example, eventually that might make it easier for it to retain smaller gravel or sand. It's still not going to retain water. It's still going to filter through that in that medium. But if you find a nice layer of gravel on the bottom and you dump a bunch of sand on it, it's going to retain that sand a lot longer than it's going to retain, something else. And so all this stuff kind of compounds over time. Sometimes you got to dump your basket out to get things out of it, to change your positions. But broadly speaking, our genetics there's no such thing as genetic memory. We don't remember these things just haphazardly. If you were born into a household, did it again. If you're born into a religious household, or you're born to religious parents and don't live with religious parents, you may never pick up religion unless you're exposed to it, but then maybe you may, once exposed to it, may pick it up fairly quickly or something like that. You may not ever. It doesn't, you may be more inclined to pick up religion. Like if you learn a bunch of science stuff first and then the religion stuff doesn't make any sense, you're obviously not going to necessarily believe the religion stuff in this idealized scenario. Whereas if you start off as a child learning religion, it may fill up those holes enough so that things like science just don't hold. Your container doesn't retain them anymore. So I don't know where I was going. Like I had this whole thing and then I diverged and I'm hungry. I had to go do my meal prep for the week. So I'm going to wrap this up. To Adam's point, though, or to Vesuvius's point, we don't need an ism to replace religion. We could maintain Christianity, make it all metaphorical, and I'm fairly fine with it. We can do the same thing with Islam, make it all metaphorical. It's the fact that when you base things on things that are not true, when people find out that they're not true, they tend to abandon the system. Ask any internet atheist, or many of the atheists that are online making content, they were religious people. Some of them very devout. Some people like Matt Dillahunty or Genetically Modified Skeptic were very religious people. They were fundamentalists to some extent. And when they realized that some part of their faith wasn't true, it shattered the entire foundation. If you have a system where you can base truth on that which is measurable and testable, you can always fall back on the idea that things are measurable and testable. When you can't measure and test them, then you have a problem. If you base your worldview on something other than God done it, you're far more likely to have a system that is tolerant of change. Which is something that religion isn't very good at. Religion is very much an anchor to progress. And I get that. We need some things to slow us down so we're not full-on progressive and end up nuking ourselves. Because that is what would happen. When people forget patience, they become authoritarian. Which is what a lot of the progressives, and a lot of, not all, not even most necessarily, BreadTube and the more excessive left tend to be very they tend to be more authoritarian because they don't think that they're not willing to be patient. And I understand them not willing to be patient, but now they're not necessarily patient for things that they should have been they shouldn't have even thought of at this point, let alone have to have been patient for. It took decades for gays to become mainstream. Gay men, gay women, the issues of transgender people could have been normalized nearly as easily as the gays were in the last decade or so. But instead they went full radical because they didn't want to wait. They didn't want to be patient. And they instead of actively treating them as normal, they treated them as special. And now there's all this controversy and this pushback and things like the straight pride parade, which okay, guess what? It's a dumb idea, but I get it. I get the concept of straight pride because why should we be proud that you're gay? It's just how you're born. It's an immutable characteristic. Yeah, you're right, it is. I understand that they're doing it to help make gays more visible and make the flamboyant ones more normalized but it doesn't necessarily do that. I think that somebody like Will Truman from Will and Grace was a better example for normal gay people than most of the pride stuff. It's my opinion on it. That's not necessarily reality in this case, but I think that when I think about what I think of when I think of a gay man, I don't even think of Jack from Will and Grace. I think of Will. I think of a person with a job, who's educated, who goes out and does stuff. They just happen to like sleeping with guys. Same thing with lesbians. I think of them as just they're not just the softball coach. They're somebody who's out there just living their life, who just happens to, be in a relationship with a woman. We can go into this whole debate about, trans and what that means and gender and sex, but I'm not in the mood for it today. So like I said, I's got to go. Content. Next week is Father's Day. I won't be doing any streaming on Father's Day. I still got some domestic chores and whatnot to do around the house for next weekend. Weekend after that, I will do a proper Sunday update stream, which this is kind of like. But I will be actually doing updates for work. So I have all day for it. There's a pot to cut the grass on Saturday. Actually, I like cutting the grass, but yeah. Anyway, that's it. Got out of my room. All right, that's not me. Goodbye and hello, as always.